almost 3 years through college, I delivered pizzas on weekends. It was one of those franchise places that stayed open until 2 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, which meant I wouldn't clock out until 2:30, or sometimes closer to 3, depending on how long closing took. The money was solid because of tips, and I actually preferred the late shifts, since less traffic meant faster delivery runs. I guess the trade-off was driving home alone at 3 in the morning every weekend. But I was 20, and that kind of thing just didn't register as something to worry about. On the way home, I'd almost always stop at this gas station, about halfway between the shop and my apartment. I didn't always need gas, but I'd go in for a drink or something to eat, because I was always starving after a shift. The place was small, little building, 4 pumps, one of those overhead canopy lights that buzzed so loud you could hear it from the road. At that hour, it was always dead. Maybe once in a while another car would be there, but usually it was just me and whoever was on the register. I honestly preferred it that way. No lines, no waiting, in and out in 5 minutes. One night in late February, I pulled in like normal. It was freezing, and I was exhausted and just wanted to grab a water and go home. As I was pulling up to the pump, I noticed someone standing at the side of the building, near where the bathrooms were, not going in or coming out, just leaning against the wall. That whole side of the station was barely lit, so I could tell it was a man, but I couldn't make out much beyond that. I didn't really think about it. People hang around gas stations at all hours, doing basically nothing. I figured he was waiting on a ride or just had nowhere else to be. It was 3 a.m. at a gas station off the highway. That's the kind of person you expect to see there. I parked at pump 2 and went inside, grabbed a water and a granola bar and paid the clerk, a woman I hadn't seen before, asked her to put the rest on my pump. The whole thing took maybe 3 minutes. When I came back outside, I glanced toward the side of the building. The guy was gone. I noticed that, but it didn't mean anything to me. I started pumping and pulled out my phone like I always did. I had my earbuds in, both of them, listening to something I don't even remember. I was just standing there scrolling, completely zoned out, which was basically how I spent every single gas station stop for 3 years. I had zero reason to think I needed to be paying attention to anything. I was just a kid standing in an empty lot at 3 a.m. staring at his phone, with both ears blocked. The pump clicked off. I put the nozzle back, screwed the gas cap on, and walked around the back of my car to the driver's side. I pulled one earbud out as I reached for the door handle. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Fast ones. Someone closing distance. Before I could fully turn around, something hit me from behind and I went forward into the side of the car. A hand grabbed the back of my jacket and yanked me around. There was a man right in my face. Close enough that I could smell cigarettes and something sharp and sour. He had one hand twisted into the front of my jacket, and his other hand came up holding something. I couldn't tell what it was in the dark. It was small, and it could have been a knife or a box cutter or something else. But he had it up near my chest, and that was enough. I screamed. Not a word, just a noise, the loudest sound I've ever made in my life. I was trying to pull back from him, and I think I was swinging at his arms. But I honestly don't remember details. Everything after seeing that thing in his hand is basically just panic and noise in my memory. What I do remember is the front door of the station swinging open and the clerk shouting something from the doorway. I have no idea what she yelled, but it was loud, and it was aimed at us. The guy looked toward her for maybe half a second, and then let go of my jacket and took off. He went around the back of the building, the same dark side he'd been standing on before, and was gone. I got in my car and locked everything and just sat there. My hands were shaking. The clerk came out to the pump and knocked on my window and asked if I was all right. I told her what happened and she said she saw it through the window and had already called the police. I sat in that lot for about 20 minutes until a cruiser showed up. I gave them my description, but it wasn't much. Average height, dark clothes. I never got a good look at his face. They took a report and that was it. I never heard anything back. I stopped going to that station after that. Found a busier one closer to my apartment that actually had other cars around even at 3 in the morning. I also don't wear earbuds outside anymore. Not at gas stations, not in parking lots, not walking to my apartment. That's completely done for me. The thing I keep going back to is that he was already there when I pulled in. He was standing at the side of the building before I even got out of my car. He didn't come up to me, didn't follow me inside, didn't approach the pump. He just stood there in the dark and waited. And then the second I was at my car with my back turned and my earbuds in and my face in my phone, that's when he came. He picked the exact moment I was least aware of anything around me. That means he was watching me the entire time I was pumping, just standing in the dark, waiting for me to stop paying attention. And if the clerk hadn't opened that door when she did, I don't know what would have happened next. That's the part that still keeps me up. This happened when I was 24. I had just spent my entire Saturday driving out to a deeply rural part of New Mexico to pick up a vintage cast-iron bandsaw I won in an online estate auction. I do a lot of woodworking, and this specific model is super rare, so I didn't mind the drive. But the guy selling it was an older man who couldn't help me lift it, and the thing weighed hundreds of pounds. I had to essentially disassemble it, piece by piece, to get it into the back of my SUV. Because of all that extra work, I didn't actually get back on the road to head home until almost 10:30 at night. If you have ever driven through that part of the country, you know that once you get off the main highways, the back roads are basically just a black void. It is just hundreds of miles of flat land, wire fences, and absolutely zero streetlights. I was already exhausted from taking apart heavy machinery all afternoon, and staring at the yellow lines zooming past in the headlights was making my eyelids incredibly heavy. My SUV was also weighed down by all the cast iron in the back, meaning I was burning through gas way faster than I normally would. By the time I realized the low fuel indicator had been glowing on my dashboard, the needle was resting directly on the empty line. I started to get genuinely stressed, because out there, you can go 50 miles without seeing a single building. After about 20 minutes of really tense driving, I finally saw the towering, illuminated sign of a gas station off in the distance. It was a massive relief. I took the exit and pulled up to the property. It was a generic, off-brand station sitting all by itself at a crossroads. As I pulled under the massive metal canopy, I noticed how completely dead the place was. There were no other cars at the pumps. I parked my SUV at the pump closest to the building and killed the engine. It was only then I realized the main convenience store was completely dark. The neon open sign was switched off, and a heavy metal grate was pulled down over the glass front doors. The only lights on the entire property were the harsh, buzzing LEDs mounted directly above the fuel pumps. The card readers were still active, though, meaning it was operating as a totally unattended automated station for the night. I stepped out of my car, and the silence was honestly pretty strange. There was no highway noise, no wind, just the hum of the overhead lights. I swiped my debit card, selected the fuel grade, and shoved the nozzle into my tank. I leaned against the back door of my car, waiting for it to fill, just staring out into the darkness, past the edge of the concrete lot. That is when I heard a distinct metallic scrape. It came from the side of the dark convenience store building, where a narrow alleyway led around to the dumpsters in the back. I looked over in that direction. The alley was completely unlit, just a rectangular pitch-black gap next to the building. I watched as a dented metal trash can slowly rolled out from the darkness of the alley and bumped into the illuminated concrete of the sidewalk. It didn't blow out from the wind. It rolled out steadily, like it had been pushed. I stood up straight, trying to figure it out. I thought maybe it was a stray dog digging through the garbage. I stared at the dark opening, waiting to see an animal scurry out. Instead, a shoe stepped into the light. It was a scuffed work boot, Then the rest of the person leaned forward, just enough to be visible at the edge of the alley. It was a man wearing a heavy, oversized canvas jacket with the hood pulled up. He wasn't walking toward me or trying to use the pumps. He was just standing perfectly still, half in the light and half in the dark, with his body angled directly toward my car. A heavy, uneasy feeling settled right in my stomach, being out in the middle of nowhere, with a closed store and no other cars around is already uncomfortable. But having someone silently watching you from an alley takes it to a different level. I didn't say anything to him. I just wanted the pump to finish, so I could leave. I turned my back to him, trying to act like I hadn't noticed him, and checked the digital display on the pump. The gallons were ticking up so slowly. While I was watching the numbers, I heard the subtle crunch of gravel. I glanced over my shoulder. The man had stepped fully out of the alley and was now standing on the sidewalk. He still wasn't speaking. He pointed a single finger straight at the ground, right near the front of my car. I was confused and I felt my nerves building up. I took a step back from the pump and looked down at where he was pointing. Wedged tightly, underneath the tread of my front passenger tire, was a block of wood. It was a thick piece of a 2x4, and driven through the center of it were 3 massive, rusted nails pointing straight up at the rubber of my tire. If I had finished pumping my gas, gotten into my car, and driven forward to leave the station, those nails would have instantly shredded my tire. I would have made it, maybe 100 feet down the road before my car would be completely undrivable. When I saw that, the reality of what was happening made my stomach drop. This wasn't a random piece of debris on the road. It was placed there intentionally while I was looking at the pump screen. I snapped my head back to the man on the sidewalk. He had taken 2 more steps toward me. His hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his canvas jacket, and I could see he had a slight grin on his face. Then, I heard another sound from the opposite side of the gas station. A second man stepped out from behind a large metal storage container near the air pump. He was holding something long and metallic in his hand that looked like a tire iron or a breaker bar. They had set a trap. They were waiting for me to pull forward, blow out my tire, and be forced to pull over on the edge of the dark property where I would be completely stranded. I didn't stop to grab the gas nozzle or put my gas cap back on. I abandoned the pump completely. I quickly got into the driver's seat of my car and slammed the door, hitting the automatic locks. The man with the hood suddenly started jogging straight across the concrete toward my driver's side window. I put my foot on the brake, threw the gear shift into reverse and hit the gas pedal. Because the spiked board was wedged in front of my front tire, reversing was the only way to avoid rolling over it. My car lurched backward, and the open gas nozzle ripped out of my car, clattering onto the concrete loudly. I spun the steering wheel, backing the car out into the empty road in a wide arc. The hooded man reached my lane, just a second too late, his hands grabbing at the empty air where my window had just been. I shifted the car into drive and pressed the accelerator down, not even checking for cross traffic. I drove way over the speed limit down that dark highway. I didn't stop until I reached a massive, crowded truck stop nearly 40 miles away. I parked directly under a bright light, got out, and checked my tires. They were fine, but the flap covering my gas tank was bent completely backward from where the nozzle had torn out. I went inside and told the state troopers who were getting coffee in the diner what had happened. They took down the location of the station and headed out that way. But I doubt those men stuck around after their plan failed. I still do long trips to pick up tools occasionally, but I absolutely never stop at unattended dark gas stations anymore. It was about 8 years ago, back when I was a senior in high school. My mom worked night shifts as a nurse, and which left me at our house by myself a lot. It was never a big issue because I was used to it, but our neighborhood always had this dead, isolated atmosphere after sunset that just rubbed me the wrong way. Usually, I would just crash at a buddy's place to avoid sitting alone in a quiet house. We lived in a farming county where everybody basically knew everybody's business, and violent crime was practically non-existent. That specific Friday, I had plans to sleep over at my best friend's house after a football game, but she texted me at the last minute saying she caught a stomach bug and I couldn't come over. It was not a massive deal, since she got sick all the time. I left the school parking lot around 10 p.m. The drive back to my mom's place was maybe 20 minutes, but as soon as I hit the city limits, I got this overwhelming gut feeling that I absolutely did not want to be in that empty house. It was not a panic attack, just a heavy, uncomfortable sense of dread that I could not logic my way out of. I decided to call my dad and see if I could crash at his place. He lived way out past the county line, on a 30-acre auto salvage yard that he owned and operated. He told me to just come straight there, but warned me that he was in the middle of pulling an engine block and wouldn't be able to hear my car pull up, so he would just leave the gate unlocked for me. For a little background, my dad is an incredibly intimidating person. He is 6'4", built like a brick wall, and usually covered in motor oil and grease. He is the exact definition of a guy you do not want to cross, since I had a 40-minute drive ahead of me into the middle of nowhere. I pulled into a local gas station to grab some energy drinks and chips. The asphalt lot was completely dead, which was standard for our town that late at night. As I walked up to the glass entrance, there was a guy sitting on a stack of firewood outside. He tipped his hat at me, but didn't speak. I figured he was just a local country guy being polite, so I gave him a tight smile and walked in. Once inside, I noticed another guy lingering by the cooler section. The moment I walked down that aisle, he stopped pretending to look at the drinks and just stared at me. He gave me a really gross, head-to-toe look and made a comment about how it was way too late for a pretty girl to be out driving by herself. I rolled my eyes and kept walking toward the front counter. He actually followed me out of the aisle, raising his voice and calling me stuck up. But I just ignored him. I assumed he was just some drunk townie, trying to act tough for an audience of nobody. I paid for my snacks and headed back toward the sliding doors. When I stepped outside, the guy who had been sitting on the firewood was gone, which made me feel a lot better. I started walking toward my sedan, which was parked out by the air pump, and checked my phone to see if my dad had texted me back. When I looked up from my screen, the guy from inside the store was suddenly standing right by the front bumper of my car, just leaning against it. I slowed down, gave him a confused look, and kept walking to the driver's side door. He mumbled something about how I needed to learn some manners when a man was talking to me. I muttered something totally sarcastic under my breath without thinking it through, unlocked my door, and slid inside. He looked incredibly angry. I locked the doors instantly, cranked the engine, and just focused on leaving the property. Before I threw it in reverse, I checked my mirrors and realized both of those men were now sitting in a beat-up pickup truck parked at the edge of the lot, facing my car. They were watching me intensely, exchanging words with each other and laughing. We locked eyes for a few seconds, and then the driver, the guy from the firewood stack, then reached out his window and pointed a heavy metal wrench directly at me like it was a weapon. I scoffed, threw my car into reverse, and pulled out onto the main highway. Unfortunately, the pickup truck whipped out right behind me. Up until that exact moment, I had not felt any real fear. I was just annoyed. But when they matched my speed and stayed glued to my bumper, the reality of the situation crashed down on me. I wanted to see if they were actually following me or just going the same direction. So I took a sharp turn onto a winding dirt road that led to a dead-end subdivision. They took the exact same turn right behind me. When they realized I was testing their intentions, they completely dropped the act. They accelerated, riding so close to my trunk that I could not even see their headlights, and started laying on their horn constantly. I grabbed my phone and called my dad, screaming over the sound of the truck horn that I was being chased down the county roads. He told me not to stop for any stop signs, to drive straight to the salvage yard, and that he would handle it. I floored it toward his property, drifting around the dirt corners with that truck still aggressively tailgating me. Within 10 minutes, I saw the familiar chain-link fence of his business as I slammed on the brakes to turn into the gravel driveway. A massive wave of relief washed over me. Standing right in the center of the open gate was my dad. He was holding a massive steel breaker bar, resting over his shoulder, with his two massive Rottweilers standing at full attention on either side of him. I sped past him into the yard. The pickup truck behind me started to turn in right after me. But the absolute second those guys saw my dad standing in the dirt, like a statue waiting for them, they slammed on their brakes, threw the truck into reverse, and tore off down the road in a cloud of dust. I honestly do not know what they were planning to do to me, or what would have happened if I had broken down on one of those dark roads instead of making it to the yard. But I will never forget the image of my dad, standing under that halogen floodlight, totally ready for whatever was about to pull into his driveway. I'm incredibly thankful I decided to trust my gut and go to his place that night.